Welcome to Faith Vocals. My name is Faith, and I am joined today by my dog Honor. I believe that's his legs over in the corner of the shot there. So I'm on puppy sitting duty today. He's a full-grown dog, but puppy sitting duty. And if he moves around, then he may come and say hello over on this side. So if you see a gray face with some puppy dog eyes, then you'll know who he is, or if you hear a jingle in the background when he's getting a bit more active, that's Honor, and he says hello. I am, as always, every week, trying to facilitate conversation about beliefs, about the truth. I want to talk about truth. What that is, how it is that we distinguish what the truth is, given that I may have beliefs that you don't agree with, given that you may have beliefs that I don't agree with. That's my interest on the channel. I start from my own personal beliefs, my own personal position, and as a Christian, then they often revolve around those religious beliefs. That's what the Bible says about how to be right with God seems to me to be the most important beliefs we can be talking about. And of course, if you differ on that, that's what this channel is about, trying to learn the truth between differing beliefs. So what I've been doing, starting from my own position and understanding, is I've been going through a Bible study. We've started in the book of Genesis, and we'll continue to do so. We are looking at the life of Jacob. And let me go ahead and play some background music for one thing. So I often forget that part. I'd like to continue to be a bit better at that. But then we're going to be rehashing kind of the storyline that we've been going through. So let me turn that down a little bit for myself. I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear a difference in the volume, but we'll diminish my distraction level anyway. So Jacob is the grandson of Abraham, and we spent quite a bit of time in previous videos looking at Abraham's life and how Abraham walked with God. Spent a couple videos in the life of Isaac, Abraham's son, who's very special because God promised this specific son to Abraham. And Isaac was born to Abraham when Abraham was 100 years old. When Abraham's wife was 90 years old, she was past the understood age for childbearing. They used to live longer in the days of Abraham than we tend to live today, but even then she was understood to be past the age of childbearing when she gave birth to Isaac. That was Sarah who gave birth to Isaac. Isaac is, God had promised Abraham that his offspring would receive the land of Canaan, where Abraham was living as a visitor, as a nomad. So he didn't really own property. He did buy a field where he buried Sarah after she was deceased, but that's about the only property we hear about Abraham taking ownership of. But God had promised him that his offspring would become as numerous as the sands on the shore, as numerous as the stars on the in the sky, and would come to be in control of the land then known as Canaan. Currently the land of Israel, as the Bible tells it. So Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. He was also the father of Esau. Esau was the older son, but God told Rebekah, Jacob's mother, Rebekah married to Isaac, mother of Jacob and Esau, that the older son, Esau, would come to serve the younger son. They were actually twins. Esau was born first, and Jacob was born second. And just as God prophesied, Jacob was able to get Esau to trade his birthright for some stew. Esau was a hunter, and he had come back from the hunt famished. It was an unsuccessful hunt, and so he was willing to trade this stew that he felt like he was starving. He needed the stew in order to live. What did he want with the promise that he would get a double inheritance if he wouldn't live beyond that day? So Esau made what I think the Bible determines to be a foolish decision. The Bible says that Esau despised his birthright, and that because he despised that birthright, he traded it to Jacob for this bowl of stew. So good for Jacob, because he gets the promise that when Isaac passes away, then he will inherit double the portion that he otherwise would have. The firstborn child, the one who was going to benefit from the birthright, usually inherited twice what all the other children would inherit from their father's wealth. And in this case, Jacob had traded upward to gain that right. But Isaac still intended to give Esau a special blessing. And we learned a couple weeks ago how Rebekah and Jacob worked together to deceive Isaac. They took advantage of Isaac's blindness in his old age to deceive him into thinking he was blessing Esau when he was really blessing Jacob, which is kind of good for that prophecy that God gave to Jacob, because the blessing that Isaac would have given to Esau included that Esau would have ruled over Jacob. But according to the prophecy that God told to Rebekah, and because Jacob was there deceitfully receiving the blessing in the place of Esau, then Jacob received that blessing, and Jacob was now to rule over Esau according to the blessing. Well, naturally, when Esau realized that this deception had occurred, he was none too happy about it. He was fit to kill, literally. He was ready to kill Jacob. As soon as Isaac passed away from old age, he was plotting to kill Jacob. Rebekah caught wind of this, and so she told Jacob, "You've got to get out of here. I am not going to lose both of my sons. You leave. You go to my brother's home. My brother lives in Haran. You marry one of his daughters. You settle down, and you come back later when everything is safe. I'll let you know when everything's safe." So Jacob went and did as she said. She convinced Isaac to let Jacob go, saying, we can't have Jacob marry the girls in this area. Nobody here fears God. I want Jacob to marry from my people. And so Isaac was, I think, kind of fooled again into letting Jacob go. I think personally, if he'd known that Esau was getting ready to kill Jacob, he'd probably be okay with the idea anyway. Not Esau's idea, with Rebekah's idea to let Jacob go elsewhere. But so Jacob, last week, we saw how Jacob left home, and on his way, he stopped at a place now known as Bethel, House of God, Bethel, and he slept there, laid his head on a rock. There were pictures about this dream that Jacob had of a ladder where angels were going up and down the ladder, and at the top of the ladder or beside Jacob, depending on how you translate the Hebrew there, God was there, and he promised Jacob that he would take care of Jacob because he had a promise to Jacob's grandfather Abraham, that Abraham's offspring would claim the land of Canaan for themselves. Jacob was that offspring. God had selected Jacob based on the prophecy that he had given to Rebekah, and so Jacob was supposed to be the one to take the land. So God's saying, "Go, I'll keep you safe. I will bring you back here as per my promise to Abraham." So now we are continuing that story. Let me go ahead and pull up the Bible website that I like to use, blueletterbible.com. That's that little button that just lit up over there. That's the name of the site, Blue Letter Bible. Actually, I think it's .org, or you can type in blb.org. This is a free resource that I love to promote, even though I am not sponsored by them, have no relationship with them other than that I really appreciate this resource. What I love is their tools. This interlinear tool allows you to look at the Hebrew, and then you can see how these Hebrew words were translated, not just in this verse, but you can look up the actual Hebrew word, see definitions for it, and see how it is translated in other Bible verses. So that's just one of the things I like about this site. And I hadn't promoted it in a while, so I thought I'd go ahead and do that, and I keep clicking those double arrows when I want to click the back button. So here we go. We're back. Genesis chapter 29 is where we continue our story. Got a little spoiler here. Then Jacob went on his journey and came to the land of the people of the east, from the region of Canaan. Haran would have been east of Canaan, east, and I think north, based on some maps that I've seen. So he would have been traveling eastward. And as he looked, He saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep lying beside it, for out of that well the flocks were watered. So apparently there's this community, and there's several different herds owned by several different people, and so they've got different shepherds guarding the sheep that belong in each herd. The stone on the well's mouth was large, and when all of the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep, and put the stone back in its place over the mouth of the well. Jacob said to them, "My brothers, where do you come from?" They said, "We are from Haran." So I bet this is probably common language, because I don't know that I'm wondering this early in human history, how prevalent maps would have been, especially for long distances. I don't hear a lot about roads at this period. I don't know that we've heard a lot about roads in Genesis as we've gone up to this point. In Exodus, there is mention of certain highways that had developed by the time of Exodus, and so as God is leading the children of Israel, the descendants of Jacob, out of Egypt, then he is telling Moses, "You're going to take them this way and not this way, because I've got these reasons." And he's talking to highways, which would have been well-traversed walking roads, or roads where you would ride a beast of burden, go with a caravan, that kind of thing. When I think of a highway nowadays, I think of roads for cars that are often suspended, like between hills, keeping a level terrain where there might have been rolling areas that would have required more distance to be covered. So our highways now look a little bit different than the ancient ones. But for some, if you don't have roadways really built up, it was the Romans who really did a lot for humanity as far as establishing a good road network through the area that they controlled. This is before Romans, I think, even existed as a people group. If you're not going in an area where there are roads, then maybe you would hear you're to head in a certain direction. But I wonder how easy it would have been to travel. Maybe they would have had ways that I am less familiar with for navigating. Of course, they probably would have had access to the stars and known how to use them for navigation. I don't know if they would have had access to compass technology at this time or not. I doubt that there would be cartographers really going through, say, the desert regions around where Isaac would have lived. He lived in the area of Beersheba, I think around the region of the Negev desert in south of Israel. That's why it's called Negev. I do believe Negev means south. And so it would have been harder for someone to make a living out of being a cartographer, especially before some of the advancements in surveying technology were developed. And so I don't know whether you would have, what kind of resources you would have had to navigate besides looking at the stars and the sun and the moon, trying to figure out your location based on that. You might have, when you arrived in vicinity of a town, when you saw a person on the road, you might say, "Where do you come from?" And so that person would say, "We are from Haran." And then you go, "Oh, okay, I'm in the vicinity of," or I can ask this person, "Where is it?" And they can point out where it is and how far they've come. And then I might be able to get a sense of where I'm going and which direction I should be going that way. I'm largely trying to imagine this, trying to speculate this from a position of being uninformed about the historical resources they had for navigating. But I imagine he's coming here to these shepherds at this well, and they say, "We're from Haran," and it's a relief to him because he's been traveling all this way. He's left the land of Canaan. He's never seen the city of Haran before. His mother's hometown has her directions as well as much as possible. Even Isaac, his father, has never been to Haran. When Abraham was securing the wife for Isaac, he sent a servant to his hometown, which is Haran. And so Abraham came from Haran, the servant went to Haran, Rebekah came from Haran. but Jacob would have not had any personal experience with the region until now. So, they're from Haran. He said to them, "Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor?" Nahor was Abraham's brother. Abraham had his son Isaac late in life, as I said. So, the brother to Jacob's mother was Laban. So, maybe the timing doesn't. Okay, no, I get it. Here's why I'm confused, because here the word son of is actually not literal, and I forgot that bit. Nahor was the brother of Abraham. Nahor had a son named Bethuel. Let's go check this out. You've probably seen this if you've been watching the series. Let's go back a couple more chapters here. One more. Yes. So the servant goes to this area of Haran, finds he's looking for a suitable wife for Abraham's son Isaac, and he prays to God, saying, "O Lord God of my master Abraham, please grant me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. Behold, I am standing by the spring of water, and the daughters of the men of the city are coming out to draw water. Let the young woman to whom I shall say, 'Please let down your jar that I may drink,' and who shall say, 'Drink, and I will water your camels,' let her be the one whom you have appointed for your servant Isaac." So he kind of prayed that God would be willing to let this girl pass this test, and the test was that she would be willing to serve him and water the camels, which was no small task. Camels drink a lot, and he had a bunch of camels to be refreshed after a long journey. And so this would show, one, that she's humble, that she's generous, that she's a hard worker. It would demonstrate a lot of qualities that would be favorable in a wife. So it says, "Before he had finished speaking, behold, Rebekah, who was born to Bethuel, son of Milcah, the wife of Nahor, Abraham's brother, came out with a water jar on her shoulder." So this is a little confusing. Nahor is Abraham's brother. Milcah is the wife of Nahor. Bethuel is the son of Milcah, so he's also the son of Nahor. So he would have been Abraham's nephew. Bethuel was the father of Rebekah, and later on here we see where I'll get there in a moment. Rebekah had a brother whose name was Laban. So Laban is the son of Bethuel, but since Bethuel was the son of Nahor, then we're seeing here, couple chapters back, "Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor?" So he's saying the descendant of Nahor, and these people understood him in that context. Sometimes when we read the Bible, we see these distinctions in language that don't make sense in our culture, and they can trip us up in our understanding of the word. So that's why I'm getting into the detail there. They said, "We know him." So they know exactly who he's talking about. He said to them, "Is it well with him?" They said, "It is well. And see, Rachel, his daughter, is coming with the sheep." So Rebekah told Jacob, "Go see my brother Laban marry one of his daughters." So this is Jacob's first experience with one of the daughters of Laban, who would be a potential wife to him. As she's coming, he says, "Behold, it is still high day. It is not time for the livestock to be gathered together." Now, I don't know a lot about raising sheep. I'm assuming he's talking about like in the evening to go into what's called the fold. It's a confined space for the sheep where the shepherds would be able to guard it overnight and make sure no predatory animals can get in and harm their flocks during the night while the sheep are asleep. So that's my assumption here. I'd love it if you know any more than I do about ancient navigation, about shepherding in general, about any of these subjects, if you can give any more insight into the different culture that we're seeing here and the different levels of it. I'd love to see your comments down below and downstairs, as I like to say. And even if you just have thoughts and questions and opinions of your own, I'd love to see those in the comments downstairs as well. So it's not time for the livestock to be gathered together. Water the sheep and go pasture them. So I wonder if he's looking for maybe a private opportunity with Rebekah to explain to him everything that's gone on with him. some of which he may not want to be public. Listen, I deceived my brother Esau, now he's out to kill me, so here I am. So water the sheep, go and pasture them. But they said, we cannot until all the flocks are gathered together and the stone is rolled from the mouth of the well, then we water the sheep. So they've got a local culture there, which makes good sense. Let's not do more work than necessary in order to get everybody's flocks watered. We're going to be considerate of everybody and not make everybody do more work than necessary. While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. Now as soon as Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of Laban, his mother's brother, and the sheep of Laban, his mother's brother, Jacob came near and rolled the stone from the well's mouth and watered the flock of Laban, his mother's brother. So just like I paused for a moment to talk about how Rebekah, the aunt of Rachel, by the way, had gone out of her way to water the camels, and that indicated the kind of character that she would have as the wife of Isaac. Now Jacob is demonstrating, maybe he's heard the story from his mother about how she and Isaac met, but he's now demonstrating his own test of character. He is now watering this flock of Rachel's, demonstrating, hey, I'm considerate, I'm a hard worker, I'm someone you want to have around, I care about you. And so definitely it would say a lot of a stranger, and definitely more so of someone who might be considering marrying Rachel in the future. And then Jacob kissed Rachel and wept aloud. So in American culture, we don't tend to have this. I understand in other cultures, I've been in European cultures where it's common to kiss someone on the cheek as a platonic sign of greeting. I assume that's all that's meant in this kiss here, that it's he is being appropriate for the culture, but also he is under a lot of emotional stress. He's running for his life from Esau. He's been traveling for a long time, probably very tired, probably overjoyed that he's found his destination, the family that he's seeking, his home away from home, as it will be if Laban's willing. And so definitely an emotional moment for him. And Jacob told Rachel that he was her father's kinsman, and that he was Rebekah's son, and so she ran and told her father. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Jacob told Laban all these things, which I'm assuming is the whole reason that he was there to visit Laban. And Laban said to him, "Surely you are my bone and my flesh." And he stayed with him a month. Then Laban said to Jacob, "Because you are my kinsman, should you therefore serve me for nothing?" So I presume Jacob was already doing some work for Laban, trying to make himself useful and a desirable member of the household, a good guest. "Tell me, what shall your wages be?" Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. So it makes sense now that Rachel would be a shepherdess. I'm thinking kind of further into the Bible in the book of 1 Samuel. There was a man named Jesse, and I believe he had 7 sons, if I'm not mistaken. And God told a prophet of that time, Samuel, that one of those sons was going to be the king of Israel. So Samuel went to see which son he should anoint to be the king of Israel. And Jesse called out 6 of his sons, the 6 oldest sons. The first son certainly looked distinguished, looked qualified for the job by all physical appearances, but God told Samuel, "Man looks at the outside, I look at the heart, this is not the one," basically. Same with the second, the third, and so on. And when they got through all 6 of the sons, Samuel asked Jesse, do you have any more? And Jesse said, "Well, yes, there's the youngest son, and he's taking care of the sheep." And so Samuel said, "Call him." So they probably did a switcheroo where another one of the sons was taking care of the sheep, but I believe it would be because he's the youngest son that he got the job taking care of the sheep away from the home. The other sons probably had their own businesses to do, their own families to take care of, or whatever. They're managing their lives. David is old enough to be able to maintain the flocks. Maybe it was not a job that the other sons had chosen. And so likewise, and yes, David was the youngest son. God told Samuel, this is the one I wanted you to anoint. And so Samuel anointed David to be king. And David was the second king of Israel. King Saul was the king at the time that God told Samuel to anoint a different one. I think David was probably one of the greatest kings of Israel, probably the greatest king of Israel. And God called him a man after God's own heart. He had his mistakes, as every human being does, but one of the best kings, if not the best king that Israel ever had, with the exception of Jesus, who is Israel's final king. So in this case, Laban has 2 daughters, and the younger one was the shepherdess Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak, so we have a footnote here, and these footnotes in the English Standard Version often tell us something about the Hebrew, how the Hebrew could be translated. So this one tells us, or soft. Let's go and look for a little bit more information here. Tender, soft, delicate. Some other places that this word, rake, I think I saw was the pronunciation for this, or rock. So Abraham took a tender calf. Leah's eyes were weak or tender, soft. Jacob says, my Lord knows that the children are, I believe the word frail is what's being referred to here. Let's see, I'm not quite sure. I can't pick out exactly from this one which word is the word related to this. So the man who is most tender and refined among you will begrudge food to his brother. So delicate, I think, is the idea that we're getting into. Unfortunately, looking at these verses, you lose the context unless you're familiar with the underlying passages. I don't quite remember what's going on here in Deuteronomy. This is David, and I was gentle today. I think he's using this word in the sense of the word gentle. He's comparing himself to some men who were actually family members of him, and these sons of Zeruiah had violent tendencies. David was kind of kept butting heads against them because they settled problems with the sword, where he preferred to settle them with diplomacy. David also settled things with the sword, but often these particular persons that he was referring to would settle them before he'd have a chance to talk things out. So that was an issue, and ideally the godly way to settle things is to talk things out, not to settle them with violence. But so gentle, soft, delicate. Something about Leah's eyes is they're frail. They're not strong. So she has this weakness, but Rachel was beautiful in form and appearance. So Jacob loved Rachel. And he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than I should give her to any other man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him but a few days because of the love he had for her. So that is definitely a romantic sentiment in the Bible. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife that I may go into her, for my time is completed. So Laban gathered together all the people of the place and made a feast. But in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and he went into her. So apparently Laban is performing this switch without Jacob's understanding. I don't know much about the marriage customs of the day, but I understand that it was common for the bride to be veiled at the wedding ceremony. So that may have been a reason that Jacob would not have been able to identify that he's got the wrong bride. Often in the United States, we might wear a veil also when we go to the wedding altar. I think that's less common practice now than in the past, but we're definitely familiar with that idea. And then in the evening, of course, the family's been celebrating the wedding, and then in the evening, the groom finally has the opportunity to be alone with his wife and to consummate the marriage. We're a lot more familiar with having our homes lit well than they probably would have been in the time of Israel. I understand that before the electric light bulb, then it was more common to go to bed as it was getting dark. If you're staying up and celebrating into the evening, then things are going to be dark. You may not be able to identify who you're with when they're unveiled at that point. And so apparently that's what happened. Jacob consummated the wedding with the wrong person. And I was glancing at a commentary. This is, if you're not familiar with commentaries, then this is where someone has gone through studying the Bible and is offering their opinion on what the Bible says, much like I'm doing here. I am giving my commentary on the Bible verbally. There are written commentaries on Bible passages. So if you're studying the Bible and you want to have a well-rounded idea of what's going on and you're not familiar with the culture, you might refer to one of these commentaries in case the person who wrote it has studied more on those cultures than you do. And one of the commentaries that I looked at made a point. How would Leah have felt about being switched in for Rachel in a wedding that Jacob didn't want? She would be the unwanted bride at this wedding. It might have been appealing to her if it gives her someone who's going to take care of her, maybe with the weak eyes. Maybe it was unlikely that she would be married to someone under normal circumstances. I wonder how much opportunity came into the area. Someone new arriving in the area. Well, now that's a new prospect for marriage that may not have been there before in a smaller community. I don't know how large the city of Haran had grown by the time Jacob was visiting. I believe it was established by Abraham's father, Terah. It's named after Abraham's brother Haran, who passed away before Terah left the region of where they started, moved to the region where Haran was established. And so for Leah, maybe she's seeing this is the only chance I get to be married, so I may as well marry him. Just like Laban said about Rachel, it is better that I give her to you than I should give her to any other man. Maybe Leah's seeing this the same way. It's better that I go with Jacob, even if he wasn't hoping for me, than that I go with some other man. I wonder how Rachel felt about this. She was the one who was in line, but apparently Laban had the authority, and she was obedient enough that he's saying, no, I've got other plans. And so she gets switched out in the place of her sister Leah. In any case, I don't see this as a good thing. I think the Bible, as we go, it makes it clear that this is not a positive event. It's interesting that Jacob, who deceived Isaac into giving him the blessing intended for Esau, is now getting his own taste of deception. It's unfortunate, but it's also kind of ironic justice that now he is being deceived, and there is a switch being made for him. He thought that he was speaking to one bride, and that he was receiving one bride, and he's been deceived into taking another. So unfortunate, ironic, and given how Jacob got into this situation, just. So we'll get back to where we were. Laban gave his female servant, Zilpah, to his daughter Leah to be her servant. Let's just glance at this, or had given, okay. So apparently Leah had a servant named Zilpah who accompanied her into the wedding. That becomes relevant later. I don't think I'm going to get into where that becomes relevant until next week. But that Leah is being married to Jacob, and she has a servant named Zilpah. And in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? Did I not serve with you for Rachel? Why then have you deceived me?" Laban said, "It is not so done in our country to give the younger before the firstborn." Well, I wish he'd said that when Jacob had asked for his wages, right? It would have been nice when Jacob had first said, "Well, since you're offering me wages, I would like your daughter Rachel." It would be nice if Laban had said, "Well, just so you know, custom is the firstborn has to be married before the secondborn." Would have been nice for Laban to inform Jacob of that at that time rather than springing it on him now. And I suspect that wasn't really a custom until the day that Jacob got married to Leah. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also in return for serving me another 7 years. So near as I can guess, being unfamiliar with the custom, apparently there is some significance to the week. So some week that Jacob is spending with Leah, perhaps maybe like a honeymoon period or something that's a little bit more difficult for me to imagine. But after that week, he would get Rachel in return for serving another 7 years. Jacob did so and completed her week. Then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban gave his female servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel to be her servant. So Rachel is marrying Jacob, and she's also got a servant named Bilhah. So Jacob went into Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah, and served Laban for another 7 years. So my understanding is that Jacob has served 7 years, had the switcheroo, got Leah when he had served for Rachel, waits another week for cultural reasons, and then he's allowed to marry Rachel, but he is committed to serving for another 7 years. So he's married to the two, but he's serving for a total of 14 years. So this is where I'm going to pause now. We don't see any comments in Scripture. I'm trying to switch back to my full screen cam there. We don't see any comments in Scripture about God's involvement, God's plan for this event. Obviously, God promised Abraham that his offspring would inherit the land of Israel. Jacob is that offspring according to the promise that God gave Rebekah. And so Jacob must have offspring. And based on God's plan for reproduction, for human reproduction, the Bible clearly consistently shows that God's plan for reproduction is to happen within the context of marriage. So in order for God's plan to be fulfilled, his promise to be fulfilled for Abraham, Jacob needs to get married. So this is all according to God's plan. Jacob is getting married. But I did want to point out something. It slipped my mind earlier. I came across a section of the law of Israel lately. I want to say it was in Leviticus. There is a law in the Old Testament when Israel was becoming established as a formal nation at the time that God did fulfill the promise to Abraham that his offspring, the nation of Israel, would take the land of Canaan. God gave them his law to govern how the nation would be ruled, and one of the laws was that a man should not take a woman and her sister for his wife. So, of course, the nation of Israel has not yet been established yet. Jacob is, I would say Jacob is following God. In the previous chapter, let's go ahead and have a look at that. Previous chapter, Genesis 28, when Jacob was at Bethel. He sees that God has been in the place, and he makes a vow saying, if God will be with me and will keep me in this way that I go, and will give me bread to eat and clothing to wear, so that I come again to my father's house in peace, then the Lord shall be my God, and the stone which I have set up for a pillar shall be God's house, and all that you give me I will give a full tenth to you. So he makes this promise to God. God has already promised him that God will keep him safe. I am the Lord, the God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and to your offspring. Your offspring shall be like the dust of the earth, and you shall spread abroad to the west and to the east and to the north and to the south. And in you and your offspring shall all the families of the earth be blessed. Behold, I am with you and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Getting a little dry here, so just a moment. So, Jacob vows, if God will do this for me, then I will follow him. That was not the practice that his grandfather Abraham had. God told Abraham to do something, Abraham did it. God made Abraham a promise, Abraham trusted it would happen. Excuse me. So, let me slide a little bit further in shot here. I wonder how far I've been out of shot the whole evening. So, the God, Abraham, has been fully committed to God, even to the point when God was testing him to see if he would be willing to part with the son that God had promised him, challenged Abraham to sacrifice his son Isaac physically. Abraham was obedient to that, and then God stopped him ahead of time. So we know that God has never been for human sacrifice, with the exception of Jesus. Jesus is God the Son, took on a human identity, was born a human child, and grew to be a human man who died on the cross for our sins. That is the only human sacrifice that God has been in favor of, and it's because it is he himself who is taking on that sacrifice. The way that the Christian concept of the Trinity works, God the Son is God, and so God is taking on that sacrifice for us, and had to do it in human flesh, because he is taking on the punishment for the sin, that the rebellion that we have committed against him. So, but in terms of other human sacrifice, that has always been a sin against God. In the case of Abraham, God called on Abraham to be willing to sacrifice his son, and Abraham, if God had not stopped him, would have. So that's as clear a picture that can be presented, that Abraham was obedient to God, but God did stop him, because human sacrifice is not what God is after. So Abraham was that obedient, is my point. Jacob is making a if-then statement here. Now, God has promised to keep Jacob safe, so maybe we could give Jacob a little bit of credit, saying, since you promised this, that will happen. But the way this is written, and I don't know if this is the limitation of coming at this from an English frame of mind instead of a Hebrew frame of mind, but it just kind of sounds to me like Jacob is saying, I will obey you after you fulfill this promise for me. Abraham was obeying God even before God fulfilled his promise to Abraham. God made a promise to Abraham, and it was 25 years after that point that God actually fulfilled that promise to Abraham. And then I was discussing it was possibly when Isaac was an adult that God challenged Abraham to sacrifice him, and Abraham was willing to do that. So you can see previous streams if that is a new take for you, as far as you've heard on the account of Abraham sacrificing Isaac. That story, by the way, is also known as the Binding of Isaac, which is the title of a popular video game, which, from what little I know of it, seems to be antithetical to Christian values. So just throwing that in there also. I did use the title of the biblical account, the title that the church has given the biblical account, the Binding of Isaac. I used that for my video, knowing that there was some cross-cultural understanding there also. So in this case, I don't see Jacob necessarily following God. I don't think he's matured to the place that he is pursuing God. It seems to me that he's got a relationship with God, definitely, because God has made a relationship with him, which is how things tend to go. God tends to have a relationship with us before we have a relationship with him. So let's see. Where did I come in? Let me get back to full face cam. There we go. I moved some things around on my software here, so it's taking me a little while to get to what I normally do. But where I was originally coming in the law of the nation of Israel, which came later, God tells Israel, I don't want you marrying both a woman and her sister. That's wrong. That's not my desire for you. Jacob winds up in this situation where he's marrying Leah and Rachel, and they're both sisters. That's imposed on him by Laban, who, of course, is not following God himself. Jacob, I would say at this point, he's not following God, but he has a relationship with God. And we'll see that relationship develop in future accounts about Jacob in future weeks. I just think it's interesting that this marriage situation turns out to be illegitimate in Hebrew law. Next week, we're going to see what the outcome of this marriage arrangement was, and probably why God would establish a law like that. That would, one of the reasons. I'm sure God has every reason to make up his own decision about how marriage ought to work. He invented it. He gave Adam his wife Eve first of all, and God has created everything, so he has sovereignty to make up the choices he does about what we do, to make the moral rules. But wanted to mention that also. This is a definitely a unique situation, and I just it's a challenge when people behave sinfully. Obviously, Jacob behaved sinfully in the past. I think God is allowing him to sense justice in our to receive justice in our account that we've looked at today. Laban is behaving sinfully. Just because Jacob was deceptive earlier doesn't make Laban any more right now. I think Leah and Rachel are kind of pawns in this game that Laban is playing. I wouldn't ascribe guilt to them for what's going on here. And definitely Laban's choices are not in line with how God reveals his desire to be for marriage in the future. That Jacob, by God's plan, should not be married to two sisters, but God is allowing it at this time. And that's also what we see is I don't see God going out of his way to chastise people for making mistakes that they are not knowledgeable about regarding morality. I think even at this time, in this stage of history, when Jacob was alive, God also had that value, would rather not see sisters being married to the same guy. I think God prefers one man and one woman. I think that's as we see the Bible progress, as we see how God urges people to live and the kinds of people that God chooses for his work, I think we see a lean towards monogamy, and polygamy winds up creating issues, and this situation with the two sisters definitely creates issues. And what I was going to say, us humans behave sinfully, and then that creates extra complications. It's pretty simple not to get into sin. God's law works great when we avoid sin, but when we insist on being rebellious and doing things our own way and not consulting God for what he wants, then we get ourselves ensnared in all these webs we weave, as Shakespeare coined. And so it becomes difficult to extricate oneself from these situations. God also hates divorce. The Bible clearly says that. No equivocation there. And so where does that leave Jacob now that he is married to two sisters? And I think God gives grace to people who find themselves in that kind of situation too. You behave faithfully from where you are. So I can think of another passage speaking to slaves in the New Testament. Should you seek your freedom or not? And the passage I'm thinking of encourages people to be as they are until God gives them the ability to do something else. So I wish I could remember that reference. I would look it up and make sure that my context is correct, but since I don't remember it, I'll go ahead and put this caveat here. So that'll be the end of this video, and see you with another video next week. I won't see you. Hopefully you'll see me, and God bless you.